It is a horrendous case, just really deplorable, despicable, and it's very sad. Even for a forensic pathologist like me, who's done 21,000 autopsies and reviewed, supervised, signed off on another 41,000, this would definitely fall within the upper 1% of cases of an atrocious, barbaric nature.
And that's coming from a man who has been in charge of more than 40,000 autopsies in his career. He's personally done 12,000. And the way he describes what we're talking about here, that's Dr. Cyril Wecht, world-renowned pathologist. Have known him for many, many years. I spoke with Julie Grant and about this case. You know, what can we expect to learn from these remains? Remember, you're going back to September. They're not found till June. In the ground, charred remains as well. So one of the things that Julie asked Dr. Wecht was, how would he conduct these autopsies?
If I were the examining forensic pathologist, I would first see to it that everything is photographed from the beginning. Then as you put the bones together for proper anatomical alignment, then you continue with the photographs. I would have a forensic anthropologist present and a forensic odontologist present. The anthropologist is the person who specializes in bone identification to determine from the juncture points of ossification in long bones and so on for purposes of getting an estimate of the age, the chronology. That is extremely important, obviously, and also to determine if there are any other defects. Then the odontologist would be examining the teeth and comparing those to dental records of the children to establish identity. The fact that the bones may have been burned, that the individuals may have been burned, makes these findings more difficult. Obviously, then it's a problem to begin with, and then in the absence of all soft tissues and the presence of bones which have been charred, then that makes the findings more obtuse, less definitive, and could destroy some things that you would be looking for. If the bones are charred and there are no skeletal remains, then you have the same kinds of problems that I have expressed before in determining cause of death, which leads you to manner of death, and determining whether or not any toxic substances were used.
And Julie Grant is with us. Julie, you know, when I think about this case, obviously it brings back memories of Kaylee Marie, who was killed down in Orange County, Florida, and how many difficulties they had there because it took so long to recover her remains. In this case, I think it's so important, though, based upon the evidence that we do know, to figure out to a certain extent how these children died, because that would be another way to tie Lori Vallow Daybell into it if you could figure out how the child was killed, if Alex Cox is the one that did it in her house or did it at Yellowstone.
Yes, exactly. And these investigators, everyone who is working this case, conducting these autopsies, they are going to try. Absolutely. This is the goal, to determine the cause and the manner of death for those two beautiful children. And speaking to Dr. Wecht, we spoke to him at length, and certainly he would do everything under the sun to try, regardless of what was given to him. And without being able to see it exactly, it's hard for him to tell, but he gave us the best opinion possible. And we talked to him about that length of time, as you mentioned, with Kaylee Marie, Vinny, how that length of time in the Florida case contributed to the findings later. And here we have the passage of several months and decomposition. So that was one of the things I asked Dr. Wecht. How does the decomposition, the weather conditions, all that, the passage of time affect the ultimate determination of cause and manner of death?
I am not really confident that they are going to learn a great deal from these bones beyond identifying them. Insofar as ascertaining a cause of death is concerned, I doubt that is going to be accomplished, because even, let's say, for example, a fractured skull, unless it is a real crippling blow that produces a deep press fracture, the bones of the skull in children, they have not fully come together, are different bones: frontal, temporal, occipital in the rear, and parietal on the top, between all the rear and back and sides. Those bones are not fully ossified. So they begin to crumble and fall apart. In order to determine whether it's due to a fracture or not, that may be impossible. X-rays need to be taken from multiple angles of individual bones, of sets of bones, especially at the juncture sites and so on. So that's the other specialist who should have been called in, and hopefully was, along with the anthropologist and odontologist, to work with the forensic pathologist, and I forgot the toxicologist, in putting everything together. It's a multifaceted forensic scientific investigation, and I'm sure it is being done very thoroughly in light of the publicity that this case has received.
All right. And Vinny, Dr. Wecht, we know he is off the charts brilliant, world renowned in the area of forensic pathology, and he is also a lawyer. So, of course, we talked about how one of the key things that are done with pathological findings in a case like this is correlation, right? And you know this, Vinny, from having been a prosecutor. You're going to take all of that clinical information that you're learning, all of the case information, like the last times these children were seen, the dates, the forensic cell phone evidence, photographs, all of those things, piece it all together and then correlate it with what's being found at the autopsy. So he said one thing is really important to know is not to look at the autopsies and the findings in a vacuum. You look at the whole case, the big picture, everything they've learned, and there's a lot here. And Dr. Wecht is very confident that everything that should be done is being done here. They're taking their time and being very, very thorough in trying to get to cause of death, which would then lead them ultimately to manner of death, if that can be accomplished, Vinny.